Hi, Jen.
Oh, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Hey,
It's been a couple weeks.
I know. I've been loving catching up though.
You're all tan and blonde.
Yep.
Your
But
picture
life is good.
wonderful from vacation.
It's been nice, yeah. I'm really enjoying it. We've got one more week.
Oh, wait, you're still on vacation.
Hmm?
Oh, I thought you were like getting home.
Nope.
Oh, well, that's awesome that you're like making time to still do Zoom meetings and stuff. That's cool.
Absolutely. I need it more than ever. Vacation is a time I don't want to let my guard down.
I don't think I've ever been on vacation sober. Well, besides Christmas, which was like 3 days, but anyway, yeah, we
Longer.
went through the I think it's been like a couple weeks. We're in how it works right now. We finished going over like the columns for last week. So this week is week 10. It's continuing on with how it works. We're about halfway through the study. It's a 19-week study, so we're on week 10 now.
Awesome.
Yeah. So my name is Jessica and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Big Book Workshop. We as leaders do not consider ourselves to be the gurus of the Big Book of AA. We do not consider ourselves to be experts in anything at all. For those who care to, please join me in a moment of silence to remind us why we are still here and for the alcoholic who still suffers. And please join me in the workshop prayer. God, let me
Yep.
set aside everything I think I know about you, AA, myself, and my disease for an open mind and a new experience. Let me be honest and thorough. Amen. For the first couple of weeks, we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves to get to know one another. I'm Jessica, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jen. The purpose of this workshop is to experience the recovery process as outlined in the Big Book of AA, either for the first time or again, so that we may better carry out and understand our primary purpose, which is to stay sober and carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic. We are here to talk about recovery only and go through the 12-step process as outlined in the Big Book of AA. This is not an emotional or intellectual exercise. This is a spiritual exercise so that we can all recover and experience the recovery process as we read it together. It is recommended that anything you hear here that cannot be reconciled in the Big Book, 12 and 12, or AA approved literature simply be ignored. Okay, so let me pull up the document for this week. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. Can you see that? Oh, wait. Resume screen share. Can you see this document? It is so weird. Let's try this again. There. Now you should be able to see it. Can you see it? Okay. Perfect. Okay, I don't know what just happened. But I guess we are going to start out with reading page 64, paragraph 3 to page 66, paragraph 2. We did read this last week, but it says repeat this week. So 64, paragraph 3. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all form of spiritual disease, for we had been only not mentally and physically ill, we had been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Page 66, paragraph 2. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry, and we asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found it out that it was our self-esteem, our pocketbook, our ambitions, our personal relationship, including sex. We were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set aside each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. In the column that says I am resentful at Mr. Brown, the cause, his attention to my wife. I told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get the job at the office. And this affects my sex relations, self-esteem, which is fear, sex relations, so on and so forth. And then there's more examples. At the end at page 65, paragraph 3, we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first apparent, wait, what does that say? The first thing apparent was that the world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome is that some people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse and sometimes we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and the more we tried to have our way, the worse the matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph, which were short-lived. It is plain that a life in which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the price extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is, too, fatal. For when harboring such things, we shut ourselves from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns when we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. 3. 4, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. 5. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. 6, which is the price of resentments. There's 6 of them, or death threats. I think I read a little too far. But now we have come to the second column. In column 3, which affects my, on our review of resentments, we check off, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, or personal or sexual relations which had been interfered with? We refer to the basic handouts, instincts of life handout on page 67 of this workbook. I'm gonna flip to that and see what that was. That is not on page 67 of this workbook. There's no handout on page 67. I don't know what that means. I guess we could just keep reading. Did you want to go ahead and read, Jen? Do you have your book there, or can you read this on
I
here?
don't have my literature with me, but one thing I pulled up for this week is in the 12 and 12 for step 4, it talks all about basic instincts, and basic instincts
Oh,
is what column 3 is. So since you just mentioned column 3, could I read a little bit of that, which
yes,
might have
please.
been sort of like the handout that they were referring to?
Yeah, I just noticed this book is a little jumbled. Sometimes it's not accurate where they say to find things.
So this is step 4 in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book. And
Okay,
I'll read until I think it's not pertinent anymore.
sure.
Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Creation gave us instincts for a purpose. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. If there were no social instincts, if men cared nothing for the society of one another, there would be no society. So these desires for the sex relations, for material and emotional security, and for companionship are perfectly necessary and right, and surely God-given. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper functions. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, they drive us, dominate us, and insist upon ruling our lives. Our desires for sex, for material and emotional security, and for an important place in society often tyrannizes us. When thus out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble. practically all the trouble there is. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. When that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. And I think I can stop there.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll start here. So we go to the self column, which is column 3. We take the self-esteem column and remembering always to work from top to bottom. Besides each name and each cause, we look to see if it was a threat to our self-esteem. Did it put us down in the eyes of other people? Did it embarrass us? If so, we put a check mark there. We work from top to bottom with our mind on one thing only. Is it a threat to self-esteem? Then we come back to the personal relationship column. Starting at the top and working to the bottom, is it a threat to our personal relationships? Then we come back to the security column. Do material first, then emotional security, then to the sex column. Oh, these are just the handouts I went over last week. They're on the back of the book here. Okay. Is it a threat to my acceptable sex life with my spouse? Is it a threat to my hidden sex life with my girl boyfriend? We work each column separately from top to bottom, and then we look at the ambitions column. Everybody has plans in regard to their future. That's a part of our makeup, and we get just upset if you threaten what I'm trying to get is if you threaten what I've already got. The only way I can be upset is if you threaten one of the two, my basic instincts or my ambitions in those areas. As I fill these out, I begin to realize that I'm making an awful lot of check marks under one particular column. I finish the column and I realize something important to me to know. First, in the first column, I realize it's not how many people I'm mad at, but how much they control my thinking. In the third column, I realize it's not what they did, it's how I reacted based on my basic instincts of life. Today, for the first time in my life, I realize where my anger comes from. It's my reaction based on my basic instincts of life to what other people do to me or what I think they do to me. Either one is just as bad. Now that I know where anger comes from, I might be able to do something about it. But until I know that, I can't get a handle on it, period. And that anger will keep giving me trouble for the rest of my life. I learned 3 valuable things, and all I've done is fill out this sheet. I have not analyzed it yet. I have only listed it. Describe and discuss the third instruction of inventory process. Is that like what they're going to say here, maybe? The 4th step, inventory process, the 3rd instruction of the inventory process. When you have completed your causes column, opposite each of the events you have listed in column 2, you will check which part of self is affected in column 3. Start with social instincts from top to bottom. To clarify these columns, refer back to your basic instincts of life handout. This will help you with the definition of the words such as self-esteem, etc. And then do security instinct from top to bottom, then sex instinct from top to bottom, and finally ambitions top to bottom. Once again, to clarify these columns, refer back to your basic instincts of life handout. And the assignment is to continue to read page 66, paragraph 3 to 67, paragraph 1. So I already read the paragraph 3 on page 66 that was ending with those 6 prices of resentment or the death threats. So continuing on, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We cannot wash them away with more any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And this is the sick man's prayer. We asked God to help him show them the same tolerance and pity and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, "This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done." Now, the next page. Oh, maybe this is what they're referring to. So we have our social instincts, which are companionship, prestige, self-esteem, pride, personal relationships, and they just define all of these. We went over that last week, how like if you're an alcoholic like me that had so many resentments, we started abbreviating them. I found like a bunch of PRs next to things that resentments that affected me, which means personal relationships,
Mm.
which you're able to do when you're writing these down. And what they're based off of. So resentments are feelings of bitter hurt or indignation, which comes from rightly or wrongly held feelings of being injured or offended. Fear is feelings of anxiety, agitation, uneasiness, apprehension, etc. And harms, wrong acts which result in pain, hurt feelings, worry, financial loss for others, and also self. Did you want to read it all, or is this hard to read on your screen?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Okay. I zoomed in as if I need to zoom a little closer, I could try. Oh,
Oh,
that's
oh,
work.
yeah. Okay. I've always suggested to the people whom I sponsor that they read the 12 and 12 regarding the basic instincts of life. This is to get a working knowledge about the words there and look them up in the dictionary because they are very important words that we are going to use later in the third column when we get ready to do our fourth step inventory. There have always been a lot of questions as to why Bill wrote the 12 and 12. One reason I think he wrote the 12 and 12 is that he had so much trouble selling the traditions to the groups, and he felt if he could put the 12 traditions and the steps in a book, then it would be more acceptable to the groups. But I think one of the main reasons he wrote the 12 and 12 was that 13 years later, Bill knew more about what he was talking about. Let's face it, when Bill wrote the big book and he finished it up in 1939, Bill was not a spiritual giant. He was not trained in those areas at all. Bill was not trained in human nature. He studied economics and business, and he was a night school lawyer. Yet Bill was able to write one of the most spiritual books dealing with the human nature the world has ever seen, even though he didn't know much about it. Surely God had a hand in writing the big book. 13 years later, though, Bill had worked with many alcoholics. He had worked with and studied with some of the best minds in the world regarding spirituality and human nature. And I think he felt he had more information that he could pass on to us that would make it easier to work the steps according to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill says in the 12 and 12 that the book is a series of essays that are designed to give us more information so we can better work the steps. He also says the 12 and 12 is not designed to replace the big book. The big book has always been the basic text and always will be. You simply cannot work the program out of the 12 and 12. Lots of people try, but they can't do it because there are no directions on how to work the steps. Frankly, I think that's why they love the 12 and 12. They can get it in and dance around and philosophize, and they never have to do anything except talk. There is, however, some information in there that is absolutely invaluable. If we can see it, understand it, and accept it, it makes working the steps out of the big book much simpler and much easier. Bill taught me more in the big book in 2 or 3 pages than I had learned in some 40 years of living. Let's take a closer look at the basic instincts of life, of what they are and how they affect us and those around us. For years, while reading about the actor who wants to run the whole show on page 61 in the big book, I never really understood what Bill was talking about until I got into the 12 and 12 and read the information concerning the basic instincts of life. And that's what I just read a little bit
Oh,
ago.
perfect.
Yeah. All human beings are born with 3 basic instincts of life. They're God-given, they're absolutely necessary for survival of the human race, and 3, therefore, they are good things. The first thing he talked about is the social instinct. Bill said all human beings are born with a desire to be liked, to be accepted, and to be respected by other people, and that we're born with a desire to come together in groups with other people. If we didn't have those desires and cared nothing for each other, the world would go into complete anarchy and a dog-eat-dog situation would reign. And eventually, under those conditions, the human race would fail to survive. And I will pass.
Okay. So Bill used several terms describing this social instinct, which is companionship, wanting to belong or be accepted. So many of us grew up on the outside of the crowd looking in, wanting to be and knew we could not be. Prestige, which is wanting to be recognized or accepted as the leader of the group. The world needs leaders. Somebody has to do that. Most people take on one of two directions, either to be a part of or lead a group. In either case, it's based upon what other people think of us. Self-esteem is what we think of ourselves. That's usually high or low based on what others think or what we think other people think. If they seem to like us and accept us, we feel pretty good toward ourselves. If it feels like they reject us and they don't want us, we feel pretty lousy toward ourselves. Pride is an excessive and unjustified opinion of oneself. We either think too well of ourselves or too little of ourselves. In either case, it's not the truth. I'm glad you got into the habit of going into the dictionary. I always thought it was pride was something you ought to have. All I wanted as a young boy growing up was to be the man who walked tall with pride, just a little bit sideways like John Wayne did. Personal relationships. Our relationships with other human beings in the world around us, family, friends, partners, employers, lovers, even acquaintances, and ambitions, our plans for the future. What would we like to see manifest in our lives? All human beings have these things. Now, if we want to be liked and accepted and respected by the world and the people in it, the first thing I've got to do is determine what do they want from me. It varies throughout the world. In one part, it's good education. Another, it's to be large landowners. And yet in another part of the world, it's to have a large family. Society teaches us those things, and we grow up and set goals for ourselves as to what we want to become in the future. To reach these goals, we have to set what we are going to work at. You can't just be a bum and sit on your duff and successful people like you and accept you. You're going to have to work at whatever it might be. By the same token, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. There's some things that I would like to do as a human that are very pleasurable and exciting, but if you catch me at it, you're not going to like me at all. I don't think you and I would do the work needed to reach the goal or make sacrifices necessary unless we get a reward for doing so. And the great reward? Well, Bill says in his story when he said, I had arrived. How many of us have done that? We set our goal and we just work our tails off for years. The day we reach the goal, we pat ourselves on the back and say, you're a fine fellow, you're a good man, and you're doing great. There's a feeling that comes over us, which was one of those incredibly wonderful feelings. The only thing wrong is that it seems to be just a temporary feeling. No sooner do we reach the goal, get the praise, recognition, and prestige from it, we look around and say, is this all there is to it? So we set another goal, and we work and we work and we strive and we strive and we sacrifice and we reach a new goal and get the praise and recognition, and it feels great. It doesn't last long, and we set another goal. It seems to create within we human beings an insatiable desire for more and more power, more and more recognition, and we're not getting it fast enough, or they're not giving it to us fast enough, the way we think they ought to. So what do we do about it? Well, we start taking shortcuts. We start doing a little lying, a little conning, a little manipulating, a little stepping on other people's toes and climbing on their backs. And the instant we do, we create pain and suffering for others. They, in turn, retaliate against us and create pain and suffering for us. I guess I'll pass.
It's plain to see that a life run on self-will could hardly ever be a success. Under these conditions, we will always be in collision with people, places, and things. The second basic instinct he talked about is the security instinct. Now, I know that in AA, we try to live one day at a time, but I also know that just about everybody in this room has got an insurance policy. The purpose of the insurance policy is to protect ourselves in the future. Bill said all human beings are born with the desire to be secure in the future. If we didn't have that desire, we wouldn't provide the food, the clothing, the shelter, and the things that we need to survive. Then next winter, we would simply freeze to death, or the next drought season, we would starve to death. So this desire that we have to be secure in the future is God-given, and it is necessary for our survival. Now, once again, if you're going to be secure in the future, you have to decide. Well, What is it that I need in order to be secure? Society usually teaches us those things as we grow up, and it varies throughout the world. In one part of the world, you only need $4. In another, you need 4,000. In another, you need 4 million. And in another part of the world, maybe you need 198 coconuts, or whatever it is that they use to measure trade and barter. Based on what we're taught, we set goals for ourselves and we begin to work at it. Now, to be secure in the future, you can't just sit on your duff and be a bum. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to make some money. You're going to have to invest. At the same time, you've got to sacrifice. Hell, we can't blow it all today and be secure tomorrow. Again, I don't think you and I would do the work necessary to reach the goal or make the sacrifices necessary if we didn't get a reward for it. Once again, the reward is that great feeling that comes at the moment of successful completion of a goal. How many of us have done it? We set the goal for the new dress, for the new shoes, for the new suit, for the new drapes, for the new couch, for the new home, for the new car, for the new piece of property, for the new business. And we work and we work and we strive for the day that sucker is paid off and nobody can take it away from us. What a great and wonderful feeling that is. How great that was. The only thing wrong with it is that it's just a temporary feeling.
I'll
No
scroll up a
sooner
little bit. I'm sorry.
that sucker paid off, I looked around and his house is bigger than mine. He has a Cadillac and I'm driving a Chevy. He's got a Brooks Brothers suit and I bought mine at Kmart. That causes us to set another goal. And we work and we work and we strive and we strive and we reach the new goal. Feels good, doesn't last long. We set another one. It seems to create an insatiable desire for more and more and more and more, yet we're not getting it fast enough. They're not giving it to us like we think they should. So what do? We take shortcuts. We lie, we cheat, we con, we manipulate, and the instant we do, we hurt other people. And they retaliate against us, creating pain and suffering for us. It's plain to see that a life run on self-will can hardly ever be a success. And I pass.
Okay. Scroll up a little bit. The third basic instinct he talks about is the sex instinct. Bill said all humans are born with a desire to have sex. Now, it may get turned off by bad teachings, bad happenings, but he said all human beings are born with a desire to have sex because if we don't have sex, we can't reproduce ourselves. And if we don't reproduce ourselves, sooner or later, the human race is going to fail to survive. So just like the other two basic instincts, if you're going to reproduce yourself through the sexual act, you're going to have to work at it. Hell, you can do more work in 3 minutes of sex if you can last that long than you'll do all day digging a ditch. Don't you older fellows remember how it used to be when we got through it? My God, you just fall over sideways and the sweat is just pouring off of you and you can hardly get your breath. You feel like you've died and gone to heaven and came back 2 or 3 times. But I don't think you and I would do that kind of work if we didn't get a reward for doing so. The greatest reward is the feeling that you both get physically and emotionally at the moment of successful completion of the sex act. It's one of the greatest rewards that a human being can experience. But just like the other two, it seems to be a temporary feeling. Hell, no sooner you get through doing it, you get to thinking about when you're going to do it again. It's such a pleasurable and exciting thing that the next thing you know, you get to think about doing it in different ways, then doing it in different positions, then about doing it with other people. Next thing you know, we're doing it at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong people. And the instant we do, we are creating pain and suffering for others. In turn, they retaliate against us, which creates pain and suffering for us. It's plain to see, oh, I'm sorry, that a life run on self-will can hardly be a success. The fulfillment of these basic instincts is so pleasurable that all human beings from time to time will overdo it in one or more of these areas and create pain and suffering for others. You'll notice on that little chart, there is an object called self. That's where self-will comes from. It comes in these 3 basic instincts of life. You also notice coming out of self object, there's others called wrongs, which is another word we need to look at. Somewhere we got the idea that these wrongs meant a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. But if you go to the dictionary, you'll find several definitions. Wrong is an incorrect judgment of other people, which is resentment. Wrong is incorrect believing, which is fear. Wrong are the harms and hurts that we do to other people. Now, it's easy to spot a selfish, self-centered human being, the one who's running on self-will, not God's will. Oops. Sorry. A selfish, self-centered human being is always madder than hell. I guess I'll pass. This is actually the last page.
Okay. Damn him, damn her. By God, I'll show them. They're not going to treat me that way. A selfish, self-centered human being is always scared to death. They can't depend on God. They can't depend on other people. If we're an alcoholic reaching the end of our road, we can't depend on ourselves any longer, and we're running absolutely scared to death all the time. A selfish, self-centered human being, in order to fulfill the basic instincts of life, is always overdoing it and creating harms and hurts for others. Then we've got to be scared of what we're going to do when they catch us, even if they don't catch us. If God dwells within each of us, we know the difference between right and wrong. The guilt and the remorse associated with those things begin to eat us up. A person whose mind is filled with resentment, a person whose mind is filled with fear, a person whose mind is filled with guilt and remorse does not feel good. Eventually, searching for a way to feel better, we begin to think about the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a couple of drinks. Next thing you know, we believe we can drink and we end up drunk all over again. So at the very least, we're going to have to do something about this selfish, self-centered human being. And it seems the only way you can do anything about that is with God's help, because God made self-will, and only God has the power to overcome that. At the very least, we have to do something about these resentments, these fears, and this guilt and remorse in order to find the peace of mind, serenity, and happiness for good long-term sobriety. If every human being in the world today could fulfill these three basic instincts of life at the level that God intends, there would be no conflict on earth today. But all human beings have self-will, and from time to time will overdo it in one or more areas, creating conflict for others and for themselves. I never knew that. I just knew I was always in trouble. I just knew I was always madder than hell. I just knew I was always scared to death. And I knew guilt and remorse was eating me up, but I didn't know where it came from. You see, they gave me the rules, but they never taught me how to play the game. AA has taught me how to play the game, and now that I know how I don't break the rules anymore, and I don't hurt other people, and I'm not scared to death, and I'm not filled with guilt and remorse. This is the best information I've ever seen on what makes me tick and what causes me to do the things I do. The delusional state or delusional nature of alcoholism is the process of painting us into a corner that we cannot get out of, then poking us with a stick until the fear and frustration, anger and self-doubt culminate into a pinnacle of pressure so great our only viable option seems to be to take a drink to release the pressure. This, of course, sets off the terrible phenomenon of craving, resulting in more debacles. Pass.
Thank you. That's actually the end of this week.
Okay.
It was a shorter one. Next week is continuing how it works. So that's a week 11, 12, and 13 are finishing how it works. And then it moves on to into action. They spend quite a few weeks in the how it works. Is there anything that we went over that you want to share on?
I just believe that it's important to understand the basic instincts that we've been talking about today in order to do a step 4 inventory. It really helps me understand what motivates, what the motivation is behind my resentments and why I've hurt people. And that 12 and 12 writing on on the basic instincts is so helpful. And there's more, it goes from page 41. I recommend anybody wondering how to do that column 3, read that completely because it really does help. Just, yeah, it's definitely been a process of getting to learn about myself and getting to understand what motivates me. And I'm just really grateful, to be in this workshop. Jessica, thank you so much for hosting it. You're doing a fantastic job and
Thank you.
been
It's
great.
I like reading it too, even though I've listened to the tapes. It's different actually reading it and kind of following along and like going over it because I miss a lot of stuff when you're just listening versus reading it. And the Joe and Charlie tapes helped me a lot understanding all of this. But I even picked up something on page 26 that we just read too. Like we'd been going over all these definitions of like resentment and these different words and like went over like how sentiment means to feel and resentment is to refeel. And then they put on 126, they put the definition of resentment, incorrect judgment of other people or
Mhm.
wrong, which is I just kind of clicked there too because when I was talking to you recently about a recent resentment that I have because they do pop back up and go away and then come back even with the same people that looking at that, it is true. It is an incorrect judgment because I don't know what this other person is thinking. I just make up all of this delusion and keep refeeling that pain. So the definition is correct for both of them, but I just never put the incorrect judgment of other people together also.
Good one.
Yeah. But thank you for taking time on your vacation to do
Sure.
this.
Thank you for helping to keep me sober.
Oh yeah. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation. And I will hopefully see you next week.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.